Good evening, India. Hello, welcome to our webinar. Welcome to Medinexo's webinar. Today we're going to wait for a couple of minutes until everybody comes in. Please hang in there and we'll be with you in a minute to present to you the Research Nexo webinar about clinical trials. We are just waiting for giving a couple of minutes for people to get settled before we can get started. So thank you so much for your patience, and we will be with you soon. Welcome to the Medinexo webinar for India. We are just waiting for a couple of minutes to give people time to settle and come in, so we'll get started in a minute, okay? All right, I see everybody's in here already, so thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar. Welcome to the Medinexo webinar on clinical trials for India. I am glad that you're here, and I would like to start by saying that our goal here today is to help you and give you the ideas and the lessons to learn how to deal with the biggest challenges an investigator can have to get started with clinical trials. So I'm going to go right to the point. In respect of time, the webinar will take about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will be bringing in two experts to help me with your questions. So we will proceed right now. So welcome to the webinar. My name is Jorge Toro. I'm the President and CEO of Medinexo. And Medinexo is very excited to have a great presence in India. And we are welcoming participants from India for opportunities in clinical trials. First of all, we definitely need more clinical trial sites in India. The global clinical trials market is growing leaps and bounds, and the projections are excellent, and the number of new products and new innovations coming into the market is huge. But the industry has plenty of challenges, and there is really minimal physician participation still. There's lack of proper patient, there's lack of diversity, so a lot of the major pharmaceutical and medical device companies around the world are looking for diversification, and this is something where India can really contribute. And There's also a number of trials or developments in clinical trial industry that call for decentralized clinical trials, and we'll talk more about how that develops today. But we're going to focus on your challenges to participate and solutions for those challenges, because as doctors you find that there are challenges to get started. So I'm going to focus on 4 points that are really important to consider. First of all, managing research as a business. Second, finding the next study. Third, the slow study startup. And dealing with locating and enrolling patients. So let's just go straight to the point. Managing a research as a business is different. It's difficult because the business stream is significantly different to your day-to-day operations. There are training differences, there are regulation differences, there's need for investment, there's financial transactions that are different, and there's more. So we're going to focus specifically on how it works in general, and then we're going to go into the challenges. So first of all, managing research as a business involves managing processes like hiring and firing people that are going to be involved in your team, training and certification, managing equipment, the equipment that is needed for the specific trials, managing the supplies and how they come in. It's a different supply chain to your regular supply chain at your clinic or your hospital or your consultation room even. And the development of a business portfolio, of a performance portfolio for that clinical trial business. Also, managing clinical trials themselves is a bit different. There is a performance of the study that needs to be worked on, the performance of the feasibility assessments that you have to conduct, matching the participation of the patients, matching the interest of the participation, the recruitment aspects of this, and recognizing that this is a business that is established and it has cost, and lack of success doesn't mean lack of cost. So you have to be concerned about how to manage clinical trials and control costs there. But as any business, and the business aspect of this involves managing the money. It's not just about setting up a business and letting it run. There's indirect costs, there's money paid by institutions, the payments for the business are different, so the way to manage those payments is also different. Also, the patient care cost might be different than the regular patient care cost, because these are patients that are treated differently with a special characteristic related to the clinical trials. There is budget, and the budget is very important to work on redeeming that benefit, on reaping that benefit from the trial. There's personal time involved from PIs, from all the research personnel to administrative people, pharmacists, etc. Additional patient demands for the team. Patients are treated different in clinical trials. Study startup cost is significant, and invoicing is also different because of the fact that the money flow is different quite a bit. There's also the situation with the invoices, the study, when the study opens and closes, there is a management of the money that is significant, and also there's cost with auditing. So where do you start with all this? And I say that the first thing that you really have to consider is you have to ask yourself some questions like, why are you getting into clinical research? Clinical research is not for everybody. And it's something that requires commitment. It also is something that requires that people are really engaged, interested in serving their patients differently. So your reasoning behind getting into clinical research and putting your heart into it, like any business should have your heart into it. So you need to ask yourself those questions. What makes your site unique? Why is your site special to bring clinical trials? Perhaps You take care of patients that are special. They take care of patients that have a specific illness that needs attention, that needs special care, that there are special medicine for it, special treatments. So what makes your site unique is important. And how do you recruit patients? Do you have all the patients you need at your day-to-day practice? Or do you need to partner with others to look for patients? That's something that you have to think about before you get into this. How much time would you devote to research? Research as a business is time consuming. So you have to be able to allocate some of your time to this. This is not something you can just do on the side. So second, once you have asked yourself those questions and you feel that you have the right answers and you're into this, then second, you have to get ready. And to get ready, there is legal structure you have to establish as a business or be working with a business that has the ability to contract, to engage. You have to establish the team, build a team. If you have to hire, you need to hire. If you need to dedicate team, you have to dedicate them. And you have to understand the opportunities that you have in this market and the financial needs for it. And third, you have to get ready. And getting ready means two things. One, accreditation of your site. Getting your site ready means all the team that you're going to work with needs to be accredited. The site itself needs to be accredited. There's got to be an evaluation done. And there's a rating that goes with that. At least in Medinexo, we have a rating scale that provides a rating for your site, and we can present it to those who are interested in doing clinical research with you. Now, then you start executing, and when you execute, you start thinking about finding clinical trial opportunities and activating your first trial. That's at that moment you are in business. You are in business in clinical trials when you activate the first trial. After that, you need to repeat and improve. Remember, the first sale of a clinical trial project shouldn't be considered the last one. Should not be a failure. It should be something you learn from and you repeat more efficiently, so you're also more profitable. We're going to talk about the secrets of success in this area later on in the presentation. But now let's move on to the next subject. Finding the next study. So how do you find clinical studies here? You need to, you have, traditionally there are many ways that you can actually do that, and one of them is your connections, right? You have connections in business that, other colleagues, people that you know that can bring you the trials. Now, you can respond to clinical trial feasibility requests. Some people might actually reach out to you and say, would you be interested in doing a clinical trial? You have to use references. Perhaps a colleague has been into clinical trials and they could actually refer that business to you as well. These are the opportunities that you have. Now, references can always be helped by business development teams. So you can actually, once you establish the business and the business is moving, one approach is to actually have people who are dedicated to bringing you more clinical trial studies, and those could be sales or marketing personnel. You can also reach out to site management organizations, or you can go to online clinical research management platforms. In every market there is a centralized database of clinical trials that is regulated by the government, and you can actually reach out to see if there's postings for new opportunities there. And there are free and premium trial search services, so you can reach out to them. These are kind of the normal ways to do it, but we also are going to talk about secrets to success in the area of finding your next study. So let's talk about that in a few minutes. Now I'm going to move to the next subject, which is the slow study startup. This is one of the most costly situations in the industry. There are certain specific factors that bring the slow startups. For example, the preparation as part of the startup. If you get a clinical trial opportunity and at that moment you start preparing, you are slowing down the clinical trial because you're going to spend your time doing preparation, accreditation, gathering regulatory documentation, inspections during the trial, and that slows down the startup. Another critical factor is the system's readiness. There is a documentation, there's electronic record keeping, there's databases that need to be set up, the clinical trial management system has to be set up. A lot of times we see that the clinical trial, the research site is actually doing this as they get assigned a trial. So this is something that is better to do when you are preparing ahead of time. And preparing for the communications with patients is also something that typically suffers from slow startup or causes slow startup. Recruitment process, the registration, the coordination, all these processes have to be prepared, and for that complements the workflow implementation, which is something that brings you into slow starts. So some suggested approaches in the industry are aggressive strategies, and a lot of them center on the fact of outreach, of trying to market to patients, trying to get patients to participate, and being aggressive about getting more and more patients and getting more participation. That's one of the common strategies. Another one is to consider the importance of the clinical research associates. They definitely are the people that are going to manage the studies, and since they are the people that are going to manage the studies, it's important that they are very efficient and they're very well prepared and they're trained well before they start the startup. Otherwise, the startup will be slower. Your investment in technology is also important. If you're going to invest in having those systems ready, that is a characteristic. But we're gonna talk a little bit more about how can you be more successful at eliminating the slow study startup. Now, our fourth subject is locating and enrolling patients. There are many challenges in this area. And you normally do is you do patient recruitment, right? You have patients, you talk to them about the study, you present to the study, you connect to other patients, and you connect to those patients, and there has to be information flow. So there's also the logistics and the accessibility issues with patients. Once you engage in a clinical trial study, you actually are engaged in bringing patients into the study, and this also requires certain levels of communication. It requires that you have thought of the logistics of the trial and how they work, and provide the evidence. For example, if you have patients that are coming from out of town, patients that are coming from long distances, patients of certain age, that you have to go to their homes for gathering information, these logistics have to be worked out ahead of time. Patient communications themselves, the method of how you're going to communicate by phone, by text, by whatever methods you are using. So the challenges are data management. There's a significant issue with how to manage the data, and you have to be very well set up for this. There's team training. A lot of times your team has challenges with being trained for it. They have to be ready to manage the patients in a certain way. And also the patient training itself, how to get the patient used to doing what they need to do to follow the protocols and to follow the procedures that you lay out so that they can have a successful clinical trial for themselves, for their own benefit, and to gain their cooperation. And the other thing that's important is, like they say in management schools, manage by exception. You need to understand what the exceptions are, what the issues are, and you need to be prepared to handle them. So let's go into talking about the secrets for success in this area, because I want you to take away something from this webinar. If nothing else, that we got to meet and learn more about Medinexo. It's more about what you're going to take home here. So in managing research as a business, the secrets to success are: negotiate a good budget. First of all, once you prepare your budget for a clinical trial, that budget has to be well prepared. Get the advice of someone who's experienced on this. Use your experience on it, but make sure that you create a good budget and you negotiate a good budget with your sponsor. That's a key to success. You have to manage the cost, because the cost in clinical trials can increase if you don't evaluate it properly and you don't prepare it inside the budget. But managing it once you execute is very important, so the trial doesn't get costly to you. And most importantly, do not leave money on the table. Once you have negotiated a good budget, one of the biggest mistakes that most clinical research sites make is that they leave money on the table. And what I mean by leave money on the table is that 24% in the industry, as an average, of resources are not billed. Why is that? A lot of it is because if you don't set up your billing system properly, if you don't set up the way to collect it, the way to track your activities properly, you're going to leave money on the table, because you're not going to be collecting everything that you should be collecting. So, secrets to success in managing research as a business: negotiate a good budget, manage the cost, and do not leave money on the table. The secrets to success for finding the next study are very simple. You have to be ready. You be ready before you start the study. You be ready to find the next study. Because if you're ready, you are a highly qualified participant or site for a study. And the sponsor will know it, and they will grant you more studies. So this is the key to finding your next study. But the other thing is, be always on site. It doesn't help much if you're ready if you are not in a place where you can be reached. So be on site to your sponsor, be exposed to CROs, to those people who can bring you study. Be always on site. Remember, in any business, when you work project by project, you don't get a project and then stop selling. You have to sell. You have to continue to sell. So that part of that is to continuously be ready and to continuously be on site with new customers. It's a way to talk in business language, right? A slow, steady startup. What are the secrets to success here? First of all, be ready from the start. That means prepare before you start. Before you start a study, you need to be prepared. Be ready from the start. Have a dedicated clinical research team. The clinical research team is very important to eliminate the cost of a slow startup. And if you have a dedicated team, that's a lot better. Your team has to be clearly focused on the clinical research. You have to identify the people that are dedicated to this, and whatever they dedicate in time to it, they have to be focused. So the other fact is, communications have to be made easy for the participants of the study. It's very important that the patients who participate in the study you have good communications with them. So on this subject, you have to be ready from the start. You have to have a dedicated clinical research team, and communications have to be made easy for the patients. In regards to locating and enrolling patients, the secrets to success are, first of all, to use today's tools. When you communicate with the patient, you should be using their tools. You should be using the electronic tools that they have. They have mobile phones, use SMS, use WhatsApp, use what they use to communicate and make sure that you use today's tool when you're engaging them. And make it easy for your team. You need to use the same type of thinking with your team. Communications with your team are important, that your team can communicate internally, that your team can communicate well with the patients, that it is easy for them to track, to capture data, to capture the result. This is key to success, to have a very successful business in clinical research. So if you um, if you are going to have a takeaway from today's webinar, I would like you to have this. Take a screenshot of this layout about how to manage research as a business and what are the practices about finding a new study, about signing a study, the slow startup of a study, and about locating and engaging patients. This is a good summary. So at this point, I would like to introduce, to bring on board my guest. First, I'm going to introduce Dr. Miguel Vazquez. He's coming on board. Miguel, welcome.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for being here. Dr. Miguel Vazquez-Padua is an experienced advisor in clinical research, very practical in the matter, and he's here also to help me answer your questions. First, I'd like to give Miguel a couple of minutes to introduce himself. So why don't you go ahead, Miguel, please?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jorge. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this evening and have the opportunity to support this presentation. I am the CEO of Total Outcomes Partners. We are an organization that groups a number of professionals who have been in the research industry for many years, different capacities from being investigators to being clinical research coordinators, monitors, people involved in quality and regulatory affairs. Our aim here is to be able to, via our work with Medinexo, be able to support your sites, your clinic, your office, so that we can help you move from maybe having little or no experience in clinical trials to actually move forward so that your site, your team becomes very competitive. That's the nature of what we would like to do. We have been doing that for some time now. We've been involved with, in my case in particular, I have worked with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, GlaxoSmithKline. I've been in the academic environment doing research as well. That's my career has been for about 30 years now, and it was about time to start working directly with sites and investigators. Same thing with my team. We look forward to really support you. So thank you so much. I'm very happy to be working with Medinexo, and we're looking forward to do take you to the next level.
Thank you so much, Miguel, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I also would like to introduce Dr. Vibhu Dhawan. Dr. Dhawan is the director of Medinexo India, and he is joining us actually today from the US because he's also a licensed physician in the US. So welcome, Vibhu. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jorge. Uh, am I audible okay?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Nephrologist by training and profession. And I'm based in Mysore. So I'm so happy to have an audience from all over India because I was a full-time clinician, working basically on patient care since 3 years back. And then now I have been managing since the last 2.5 years around 12 different sites around India. And it's been a huge learning curve for me, and i've uh, I've enjoyed it very much because I never was able to talk to different types of colleagues, the way, I mean, we would talk about patients, but this is, larger data, and learn more about their systems. And of course, pandemic made everything interesting. So, there was so much more I learned. I appreciate the message, that's coming out through this, how we as doctors, we are focused on just looking at the patient, and doing almost everything ourselves. The buck stops at the doctor. We try to, anything happens, we are responsible for it. Clinical research is a pure team game, is what I have learned. So what we want to do is be on your team. So it's a it's a team based approach. So many of the doctors I interact with, my wife, she's a doctor. She had, this idea about bringing some of her inventions and discoveries out, and a lot of doctors I know have a lot of data. They want to use that, and they want to bring their ideas forward. But again, we have to realize that we just can't, do all that. Why it's not done is because person cannot do that. So again, we try to get yourself a team, get things moving. And these are great pointers that Jorge gave us today. And it's just the start, and it's very rewarding for me. It's given a whole different dimension to my career. And I think I'm still a baby in this, and lot of time to go. And great to know, both of you and the people I know through you. So I'll
Thank
stop
you.
there, but looking
Thank
forward
you
to a
so
lot
much.
more.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. And Dr. Dhawan, of course, will is in engaged in Medinexo, India. So you can reach out to him through Medinexo anytime. Um, but we're going to focus specifically on some answering some questions. But let me give you some background on also what Medinexo does in clinical trials. We have a research nexo process that basically focuses on readiness for clinical trials. So we engage sites around the world literally to be able to get them ready and rated to participate in clinical trials. We avoid all the investment cost up front by providing the technology that you need to do this, and by helping you and hand holding the process with the help of total outcome partners and our network partner Blue Cloud to gather all the accreditations that are necessary for the process, to engage you and prepare you on getting ready for clinical trials, and then to rate you so that we can present your abilities rated and ready to be reviewed to sponsors and CROs that are interested in clinical trials on our network. Through our partner, the Blue Cloud, we have more than 120 sponsors on the network, including all the larger players in the industry. Many of them well known to you: Novartis, Johnson and Johnson, Medtronic, CROs like IQVIA, etc. So we welcome to do that. At this point, I would like to dedicate the rest of the time that we have to address some questions. So, first question I have is to please expand a little bit on what does it mean to negotiate a good budget. So, I'll let Dr. Vasquez address that issue.
Sure. That's a very good question. When we talk about if you're working with a sponsor, we call them sponsors, for example, pharmaceutical industry, also medical devices, it could be medical testing. So you have one organization, a company. Sometimes they come to do place trials via either themselves or they contract a CRO. It's a clinical research organization like IQVIA is very well known, or Excel, And part of the process before everything is really set to begin the trial is that there are two things you really have to negotiate. One is a contract. So there is a contract between you, your organization. So maybe you as a principal investigator, your organization may be, let's say, a hospital system. And then you have the third party is really the organization, Pfizer, Glaxo, whatever company it is. Part of that contract includes an appendix or, yes, an addendum that is really the budget. The budget is the area that is most sensitive for during negotiation processes because at that time the sponsor will send you maybe in an Excel spreadsheet the different type of costs that they are willing to pay for a trial. So you have different line items in a budget where you have like your professional time to see patients, screening. There you have your laboratories, CTs, X-rays, time for your team, you name it. You have all of the different components that are critical to manage that trial. When you work on your contract and budget, it's very important that you receive first the latest version of the current of the protocol that you're going to start. Because once you go through the protocol, that's really the let's say the meat of the entire trial. That's where it says the introduction, the background, which drug they're going to use, what are the references, what are their aims, and then you have the specific items, and this is very important too, on what are the criteria for patients. So which patients are going to be eligible or not. So you have inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then you go into actually the process itself. So how we move forward, what kind of tests you need to do, what kind of scales are you going to use, how are you going to record, report, and so forth. So all of those tiny, let's say, but important aspect of running a trial are all spread out in this spreadsheet that is being submitted or shared by the sponsor. So you have to be very careful in terms of looking at, let's say, if there is a line item on X-rays and they are paying less, I'm going to use US dollars, and they're going to pay, let's say, $80 for a chest X-ray, and maybe that is not what is the reasonable cost for your organization. Then you have, so you start, say, oh, it's rather than 80, we currently have a cost for chest X-ray of $100. So there is a $20 difference. So you start doing the same thing again and again, and you send that back to the sponsor. So that's the way that it is negotiated. You start going back and forth. Maybe at times, and we can talk about this maybe in we're going to have some webinars later on to get into more details. But here is a very important part because you have your line items, you have your what you want to negotiate, and sometimes there is going to be not 100% satisfaction with the entire line item. But maybe if you look into other categories, you may find areas where you can really get a benefit. So that overall, the idea is that not only are you able to um, cover all of your expenses, but you actually have an overhead, that there is a funding that is going to continue to support your activities in research. So money
Perfect.
to support your instrumentation, databases, and so forth. It is a elaborate process. We're here to help you as well, and there are many webinars and information on how to do those negotiations. But we're
And,
happy
and
to help you with that.
And I think we also, this is a good opportunity to mention that there will be a workshop presented by Research Nexo as well very soon, where you will be able to come to a question answer session with your budget and what is the concerns you have about defining the budget or negotiating the budget or more so. So you'll be able to work one on one with Miguel's advisory team on this subject. Let me bring to another question about what are the issues and that you find most common in retaining a patient in the study. So I don't know if you maybe Dr. Dhawan can go for that one. What are the most
Yeah,
common issues about retaining a patient
yeah.
in a
I,
study?
I, I, yeah, I'll speak from, our Indian patients' perspective. Our patients, we have a lot of difficulty following them up on their clinical care itself. So for me, that would be the number one challenge is a lot of like our patients come to metros for their treatment, but then uh, go back home. They may be from any, little bit far away. And so it's the follow up, especially for research. And if it includes lab draws and if it includes testing and, just exam and all, so a lot of times the patients are not that motivated and uh, yeah, what we have now we have improved based on technology. So I think we should use the tools that we have right now more effectively. Um, again the when when the question is about retaining, so you have done all the hard work in getting the trial set up. You have patient's interest in mind. The patient also understands the benefit of being in a trial. There can be a lot of times direct benefit to the patient. A lot of studies have shown that just by being in it, they get a different level of care. So there are a lot of benefits. You have got the patient in now. If you have a follow-up, so if your protocol requires that, sometimes it can be just like a snapshot. But if it's a study that which a lot of studies would require follow-up, I would say, follow-up would be challenge, especially in a country like India. And again,
Okay.
so you have to think about it beforehand, like how Miguel just mentioned, put that as one of your line item. Think of that in advance. If it's like a 6 month follow up, maybe have something that can help your patient with the transport. You know your local landscape
The
costs,
logistics, yeah.
and try to put that as one of your line items, and then use technology to follow up. My professor used to say the most important thing that we have in the ward is a telephone. So telephone, now you have telehealth, you have so many different
You have many
ways to
tools.
follow up, make it easy for the patient to follow up. And that I so retaining, I think, would improve based on this. We did that in the pandemic, and I think that's something we can learn and carry forward.
And that leads to the next question in a way, because the next question is about communications. What we recommend to use for communications with the patients, and it is important to consider that at least my philosophy on this is you have to use something that the patients are already trained on using. Training a patient is very difficult, and especially when you're talking about patients because not only they need to communicate with you, but they're in the process of getting a treatment. So it's more difficult to try to engage them in different ways of communication. So it's better if you tend to use things that are familiar to them, like WhatsApp or text messages. Communicate with, of course, the phones are always good, but good communications with the patients is important and easy communication. So when it comes to tools that relate to that, I would say use telemedicine. Definitely try to use telemedicine as a component, but try to use a telemedicine that's easy to them, that goes through their phones, that goes in a way that they don't have to be trained and have to learn how to use an app, and they have big small buttons that they can punch and things like that. Usability is very important. So try to make sure that your communication tools are right and easy for the patients. That way you keep continued communication and all this. One note on that I did want to add is the up and coming trend on decentralized clinical trials. A lot of it, a lot of the sponsors are going to decentralized clinical trials, and the reasons are very good. It's just that decentralized clinical trials can engage more patients, can reach more populations in more diverse areas, and this is why we are here, because Research Nexus started from the get-go with the idea to get a global network available for clinical trials, and that's why we have the ability to bring to a sponsor a trial that involves a site in Argentina, a site in Mexico, and a site in India, and a site in Pakistan. These are the abilities, and the centralized clinical trials and the technologies that are required for that are available, and we facilitate them ready to go. So keep that in mind. But again, you don't have to use ours. It's anybody's tools, but there's a lot of good stuff out there. But make sure it's easy for the patient. Make sure it's easy for the patient. So um,
Jorge, if I may just make a
just
comment here about
go
communications.
ahead.
In addition to tools, I think it's very critical that you know your patient, your team knows your patient, so make sure that you are adapting to their what they really like. You know, they are, for example, in my culture, you know, my background, I'm from the Puerto Rico, Latin America. Our patients like to be seen. You know, pandemic has obviously changed a couple of the things, but rather than a lot of phone conversations, sometimes they need to see someone. So if you're in a hospital setting and you're doing an inpatient trial, you may have either your team, your nurses, maybe if you're in an academic institution, you may have the people in your students actually go and make sure that they are engaged, and but not only them, but if possible, and you are not doing anything wrong with privacy laws, that you also engage the family, the relatives. Their support is critical because the
There's words.
retention relies a lot in the tool, but also in the engagement. Its engagement goes both ways, and also obviously manage their expectations. Let them know what they're going to. Most likely these are the side effects in a couple of days, like you do with your everyday practice, but also here because there are many times that you're using a drug that you have not been very familiar with. You may want to talk about expectation. We're going to see you, and if they're away from, pretty far from your center, you may want to have you or your team doing some routine calls. Just how are you feeling? That kind of engagement, because that's really one of the big advantages of being a clinical trial. One way we sell them to patients is say, not only are you getting state-of-the-art treatments and technology, but also you have a very good care by a whole team, which is not really what happens in a day-to-day basis.
Very good, thank you. To go to a last question about getting started, small practice getting started in clinical trials, and I'm gonna turn this one into a very simple commercial. Medinexo, if you'd like to learn about how to get started in clinical research and you have never done it, sign up for Research Nexo. Go register. If you go to researchnexo.com, you will find below the announcement of the webinars, you'll find a click to go in and fill up a brief survey. And once you fill up the survey, we'll be glad to reach out to you. This would be the way to do it. There's no cost to doing that, but it is important for us to understand what your interest is on clinical research and what you have or haven't done in clinical research before we can actually really help you. In that, I also would like to answer by saying that the rating is important. Total Outcome Partners brought to us a proprietary rating scale for clinical trials readiness that we are applying, and what we do is we handhold our sites to make sure that they are rated above 180 in a scale of 200. And that is important for all of us, but it's very important for the sponsors. we bring a sponsor a site that is already highly rated. That means that we save a lot of time for them on their search, and that makes them interested in being engaged with Medinexo sites. Also, we literally save them a lot of time on startup because, as we said in the secrets here, the being ready is a big part of reducing the cost on the startup. I like to, I promised everybody that I would be done in 45 minutes, and we are right at the edge of that. But if you like to take 30 seconds, I guess I'll start with Dr. Dhawan to wrap this up. What would you say to a site that wants to get started in India?
Yeah, I agree with, getting started. I would say the first thing you get is, get a little bit of help. Get another person. Don't try to do it everything, yourself. Hire somebody in your, you don't have to hire somebody new, but find somebody in your clinic. I'm just talking as an independent practitioner. If you're not in an academic setting, like a lot of academic settings will have their own clinical research. Um say, in-house, you can use them. But if you're independent, have somebody in your office, use that form that Jorge talked about. They can go through, because I know doctors are busy and they have patients calling. So find somebody who can get the process started. Once you're in the process, we'll take forward. That's what I would say.
Very good. Thank you so much. And again, Dr. Dhawan and Dr. Vasquez, thank you so much for being here with us. If you would like to watch the webinar again, of course, it will be recorded and it will be made available to all of you who registered. Again, thank you so much for being here, and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.